What's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. In this video, I'm going to be going over some updates, multiple time frames for Bitcoin, but nonetheless, to go ahead and get it started here. First off, on this 4-hour chart, the main thing that I want to point out is the potential for some bullish divergence. We look here at these two recent local lows. We see the slope here for price is going to be negative. Looking at the RSI, we see a positive slope. Looking at the stock RSI, we also see a positive slope. And also, along with the RVI, we see a positive slope as well. And finally, if we take a look here at the MACD, we do not see this positive slope, this potential bullish divergence, but we do see the MACD, potentially could be see some sort of double bottom right here. Then leading into after this double bottom, maybe this will be the final time when the MACD flips bullish. MACD continues to move with strength and large momentum, volatile swing towards the upside as Bitcoin continues to move, break it back above the 4-hour. This is the bull flag channel that I've been going over. Break above resistance sitting right now, basically 68 to 69K, but ultimately 72, obviously 72 to 73, and 74K is going to be very important to break. If Bitcoin's going to find, let's say this has been a local double bottom here, and Bitcoin continues to move towards the upside, continuing this uptrend in this bull market that Bitcoin is in. Although there could totally be a bullish divergence here, and Bitcoin could, in the short term, move up to this rough range right here, find further rejection on what's been the resistance for this potential bull flag channel, especially if the 50 EMA crosses below the 200 EMA. Price continues to be suppressed. I mean, the 50 EMA could cross below the 200 EMA and price continue to actually go up. But if this cross does occur and then the price continues to get suppressed further and further to the downside, that's just not going to be the best case scenario. As I've said in one of the last videos, 62, 63, 64K lines up with the rough range where this median is. It's the biggest vector control zone on this 4-hour chart within the specific time frame of this channel so far. Estimated, or the 800 EMA estimated moving average, also price continues to lower. The EMA slightly, ever so slightly moving up, would come to meet around 62, 63, 64K, which could also, again, as it did back here, price bottomed out a local low beginning of May of this year, as it saw this deviation, this fake out of this descending bull flag channel. We saw this V-shaped recovery, like I was pointing out, was a possibility. Assuming this was a fake out, we could totally see this EMA tested again, then Bitcoin continue to go higher from there. But outside of that, all in all, going to the higher time frame here on this 2-day chart, we see this ascending, broadening channel I've been updating for many months at this point. Bitcoin could very well come lower than, retrace lower than 62, approximately 62 to 64K. If it were to drop down to around 62K, then that would be the bottom of the 50 EMA band we see here, but also correlate with a small vector control zone that correlates to the beginning of this small impulse that we've seen right here as Bitcoin found two major bottoms supports along this support of this ascending broadening channel. We also could be, as Bitcoin's closed a 2-day candle outside of this ascending broadening channel, and then it's also opened the recent one and the current one outside of it. We could totally be seeing something similar to this fake out back here. Was around 10, around 11%, from around here. 11% would take it to around 60.70K. So I highly doubt this would just repeat. We would basically see a repeat fake out. I think that's less likely than other scenarios, but Bitcoin could totally come down and dip a little bit below. Like I said, testing around 63, approximately 1,000, give or take 1,000. Roughly just validating this resistance, what has been resistance and support, and then just bounce back up and continue to go higher within an overall uptrend. But if Bitcoin continues to show weakening strength, closing below the EMA band, closing below 60K, we could totally see a testing around 50 to 53K, which is going to line up with this bigger, the second most big, the second largest vector control zone right here outside of the one down here, around 28 to 32K. We see this descending resistance of this falling wedge. On this 2-day chart, you can't really you draw a normal bull flag, it looks like there's been these fake outs, but perhaps we could be seeing, if you will even choose to entertain as such, maybe like kind of a bull flag with a channel that looks like a falling, broadening, just a falling wedge. So as I said, 62 to 64K, 50 to 53K, and then around 43K. Say around 43K to 47K is my best worst case scenario. This is what lines up with approximately like 40, 41, 42% retracement, which is the lowest Bitcoin has ever retraced in an actual, going all the way back in Bitcoin's history, which I've mentioned this probably too many times, honestly, in this point in my videos, but it's very important to continue to talk about, as Bitcoin has historically never, once it's generally been and has confirmed being in a bull market, it never retraces more significantly than 40%, maybe 41 or 42% every now and then on some of the drops in bull markets, but never been significantly more than approximately 40%. So really, and this is part of the main reason why I haven't been uploading too much. Really, the sentiment within the community, like social media presence, has been quite dull and dead. Bitcoin's been rather boring, going all the way back to around halfway of March. It's just been going sideways, basically between 60 and like 72K for multiple months at this point. The engagement's quite dead as well. But outside of that, I've been saying these same exact ranges going all the way back to, really since this run from around 40 to around 74K began as potential retracement zones. But moving into this 4-day chart, so on here, those of you familiar with my analysis, my phase cycle theory, these retracements should be familiar. Each of these retracements pertain to phases within Bitcoin cycle theory. So if we go all the way back to the beginning with what I have segmented off here on this chart, we see June 2011. This is when Bitcoin hit approximately $30. This is the end of cycle 1 and the beginning of cycle 2. We see this bear market right here, which the fib retracement is drawn with respect to right here, the first one, where then we see a bull market lead into this green range, specifically up to the 2.321. Now this entire range right here, this first Fibonacci retracement, is phase 1 of cycle 2. This second portion right here, so we see Bitcoin topping out around 1200 November, December 2013. We then see the second bear market in a cycle of Bitcoin begins phase 2. We see the bear market of phase 2, then we see the bull market of phase 2 of cycle 2 lead back up into the same exact range, which it did for the first, back to the first bear market. See this green range met, second bear market. See the exact same range met as well. Again, around the 2.321, where we see the candles close at, and maybe even just wick a little bit above, but that 2.321 seems to be a staple within this broader green range on these retracements that I'm using. After phase 2, this phase 2 of cycle 2 is ended. We then see the beginning of cycle 3, around 20,000, approximately 20,000, December 2017. We then see the bear market down to approximately 3.2K. And Bitcoin then ever so slowly has been in a bull market ever since then. We saw major drops, for example, leading into March 2020 as Bitcoin basically went as low as it did, going all the way back to the bear market low of December 2018 at 3.2K, wicked down to 3.8, 3.9K. But nonetheless, it did not make a new low, so the bear market ended and bull market began at 3.2K December 2018. And like I was saying, ever since then, Bitcoin's been in a long-term, a year-to-year uptrend. Leading into this 1.618, we see Bitcoin top out at 64,000, see a minor retracement, and then we kind of see this double, like a micro blow-off top, which formed a double top as Bitcoin had the 69K. We go back to phase 1, cycle 2, and then we compare it to what we see right here from December 2017 out to what I think will be the end of this year, if at latest within the first 4 months of 2025 when we see the upcoming all-time high set for Bitcoin. So from 2017 to whenever the next all-time high is, this is going to be the completion of phase 1 of cycle 3. As I said, back here we see phase 1, cycle 2. The first peak at the 1.618 happened within a 3-month range of March, April, May. We fast forward to cycle 3's phase 1, the first peak, again happening at the 1.618, also within March, April, May. We go back to phase 1, cycle 2, the final peak, the ending of phase 1 in cycle 2 at the 2.321, broadly within the green range, was November, December. And before I get to the main point, just look at 69K topping out at, again, not at the same fib extension, but at the same time frame. The November, December, late October, really the entirety of November and December. To give a 3-month range, March, April, May, October, November, and December, shortly see very important ranges for Bitcoin, setting all-time highs, and even a lot of times for lows. But so the main point that I'm trying to make is we see this ending of phase 1 of cycle 2, November, October, November, December, in the green range around a 2.321. Within the last number of videos, I had been stating, I think sometime around August, give or take, more emphasis to giving, like 2 months too, so like August, October, or August, September, and October, or towards the last like 4 months of this year being what is more likely. At this point, factoring in the sideways action Bitcoin has been seeing, I definitely think that that's going to be pushed back a little bit further. And I think the fact that, as I pointed out, we can see this first requirement right here, March, April, May at the 1.618 was met in phase 1 of cycle 2. If we look at phase 1 of cycle 3, 1.618 met within the same 3-month span. The second peak, again, like I said, was October, November, December. This phase 1 of cycle 3 is already doing what phase 1 of cycle 2 did. It's just taking longer, but somehow, in some way, the price is still topping out at the same time. So that's really the main reason why I do think at this point, October, November, December, so far seems to be a very solid area of time to be looking for Bitcoin to top out at, whether or not that's at around 150,000 or even as high as around 225 to 250,000, encompassing a broader range that I have been talking about, in which this historical Fibonacci zone of 2.186 to 2.382 has shown to be historically where Bitcoin tops out at the end of its phases. Is also corresponsive to where it tops out at the end of the cycle, which is at the end of phase 2 right here. Example, cycle 2, November, December 2017. Outside of that, if we look here at this RVI, the Bollinger Bands, if we go all the way back to the first time where we start to see this pattern, this trend up here, we see the Bollinger Bands, they start to go sideways a little bit. They start to, the RSI itself starts building up. The Bollinger Bands start compressing. We start to see these bullish divergence indicators printed down here. These small divergence bubbles of the letter D's popping up. And as soon as we start to see that, as soon as Bitcoin's price action starts to print this data, then we also head up towards, RSI does, towards the median at around 62. Let's say 60 to 62. We see a hidden bearish divergence occur, but these bullish divergences are compensating for that, switching the bear market bottom, the sideways range, into a bull market as Bitcoin builds up into the bull market. But if we fast forward to phase 1 of cycle 3, we can see again, we see bullish divergence indicator pop up right here. The Bollinger Bands are highly compressed, not the most compressed they had been within this bear market, but in the top 3 or so. The RSI builds up, the price builds up, and then again, we see at the median, hidden bearish divergences indicators are printed, although the price continues to go higher for another 2 impulses. Then Bitcoin gets rejected at around the 786 down into March of 2020 at around 3.9K. But the bull market hadn't ended, and definitely the bear market didn't really resume, as Bitcoin did not make any new lower lows. So this was it was just really a major correction within a long-term bull market. That is the phase 1, especially as Bitcoin continues to age and mature over time and decay. Then if we look at the most recent bear market, again, we see something very similar down here. Bollinger Bands start to go sideways. They start to taper off a little bit. They're highly compressed. See these bullish divergence indicators pop up. We see 3 here, just as we saw back 2015, which, as I've said in multiple past videos, the most recent bear market we've seen right here within this range is most comparative to the bear market that Bitcoin saw from 2013 to 2015 in terms of the price structure and how it moved and its behavior. And then for this third time, we see the same thing as these bullish divergence indicators are printed. RSI spikes up, the price changes its trend to a bull market, to bullish constructive behavior. We see the hidden bearish divergence indicators pop up. Bitcoin goes sideways for a number of months, but then ultimately continues to go up towards the upside here, as we've seen. Outside of that, this 1.618 we can clearly see has been, and I think further, more likely than not, continue to act as support, although it definitely could lose this 1.618 and go further, as I was talking about on the lower time frames earlier and have been for quite a number of videos at this point. But I think it's totally possible for Bitcoin to come down and retest what was the resistance of this 4-day bull flag, which lines up with around 62, 63, 64K, as I was mentioning earlier. In the 1.618 is here. We go all the way back to the prior bear market, dating into the bull market, the first impulse of phase 1 of cycle 3. We see something very similar as Bitcoin building up into 18, 19, 20K. Bitcoin kind of staggered off and went sideways with a slight upwards orientation for about 2 weeks. Been a number of weeks longer this time around, but really what we're seeing is something that's quite normal for Bitcoin. If we go back to 2016 to 17, we see Bitcoin lead into these all-time highs. It sat here going sideways with a slight upwards orientation. It was kind of just bobbing in between around 850 to 1200 from around December of 2016 to March of 2017 until it finally broke prior all-time high with volume support and other technical strength. I think that's most likely where we are at now during the current phase of Bitcoin's third cycle. This is the more likely scenario than other scenarios. But at the end of the day, that could totally change, and something far more bearish could, by all means, appear, play out over the next few weeks to few months, over the rest of this year, perhaps. Who even knows? Which leads me into this chart, this weekly chart. Now, before I get to the main thing that I want to point out, if you look here at the very center of this channel, which begins in 2017, offering clear support and a clear resistance towards these all-time highs. See the price back in July of 2019 as Bitcoin saw this intermediate, this mid bull market top at around 12,000 along the 0.5, the very center of this channel. Then got rejected into the March crash. It was at around 72% drawdown. We look here at these two arrows, we see the same thing happening as Bitcoin's leading into the latter stages of its bull market, hitting this 0.5. As I was mentioning, back here in November of 2020, Bitcoin sat sideways for about 2 weeks, similar to how it is doing now. It's just gone sideways for a longer period of time. Now, I think it's more likely that we are in a similar scenario to November of 2020, as I've denoted with the arrows, building up to the prior all-time high, as obviously when Bitcoin hit 11 and 12,000 back in June, July 2019. It wasn't at the all-time highs, so this was a different scenario. But I did just want to point this out just to be more open and entertaining of bearish scenarios. For example, I mean, let's say that Bitcoin is making some sort of intermediate bull market all-time high, and it does actually drop for like 72%. 72% would take Bitcoin down to around 20,000. If we look at around 64%, which is actually, if we look at so candle to candle is 50%. So to be conservative, let's do around 50% would take Bitcoin around 34K. I don't really think either of those, whether it's 50 to 72%, I don't think that range is really likely at all. It's definitely possible, but I think the likelihood is very, very small. Definitely not more than likely, but it's totally possible. But like I said, if you look at this range right here with these four vertical lines, a small little box up here denoting around 200 to 250K, late October leading into November, December this year, as I said, to be where I'm currently looking towards for Bitcoin to, with a decent probability and likelihood for Bitcoin to top out at within the upper portion of that range, at the very least around 150 to 200K, to fill in the bottom half of that range and the bottom half of the historical Fibonacci extension as I went over. Lastly, I do want to go over the cup and handle pattern that I've gone over in past videos. A number of people have been bringing this up recently and talking about it. Now that we can see a more clear, perhaps, handle on this right side, how I had been drawing it in the past was using this left side as the handle. Traditionally, typically, when you see cup and handle patterns, they aren't with the handle on the left or they're with the handle on the right. But when I was pointing out the potential cup forming, Bitcoin was not at 70 to or 69 to 74,000. Bitcoin was still building up in this massive uptrend it's seen since 15.4K, and I was just being a little bit unorthodox and just pointing out how, looking at this as kind of a cup and handle flipped on the y-axis could be kind of an inverse or a reverse cup and handle. And also me personally, this as a handle right here just looks very small compared to the size of this cup. Another reason why I like to look at it the other way, but nonetheless, it's trivial. It's not that big of a point, but I just wanted to point this out again. Just bring up the price target, conservative price target on the log chart. If we look again, it also taking it from the bounce, assuming the bounce at around 60K is the local low. Again, further firms up to around 240K. Move it up a little bit, puts around 277K. Although if we look here at the regular chart, which some crypto analysts, for example, Crypto, he says to take the price targets on the regular chart because the log chart doesn't give you an accurate representation, which price target on the regular chart is only 117K, somewhere around 110 to 120K. Although I've never seen or heard anybody else saying that, stuff I've watched on YouTube or websites that I've read, or even doing like a fairly brief search on it, I couldn't really find any other sources saying or further validating that you need to take price targets on regular charts rather than logarithmic charts, because they don't give you an accurate projection. But nonetheless, if Bitcoin does continue to move up to 200 to 250K, 113K could be a milestone in that overall larger upswing towards the upside. For example, let's say, we could see Bitcoin move up to around that range, like I said, 113, somewhere around 110, 120K. It could sit sideways and then continue to move even higher. Do something along these lines. But overall, I do just want to point out that I think that's a rather negligible discrepancy between the logarithmic chart getting a way higher price target and the regular chart giving a lower price target. Outside of that, moving into this final chart, this 12-month or this yearly chart that I've gone over in a past videos quite some time ago, but we can see a very clear pattern for Bitcoin on this yearly chart, going all the way back to January of 2012. The first halving for Bitcoin, we see a yellow year, then we see a white year. The area, the time frame where Bitcoin sees its most gains, starting from the halving year of 2012. Then we see a black year, the very beginning of a bear market. And then we see a purple year, the ending of a bear market. And then we see the yellow year begin again. So this is going to be the beginning of a reversal, the transition from a bear market to a bull market. And then we see a white year, and then we see black year, purple, yellow, so on and so forth. And assuming this pattern is going to stay intact, it definitely is subject to change. I definitely don't think this is something that's going to always be the exact same and a consistent pattern for the rest of Bitcoin's history. Now, that could be the case, but I think it's more likely than not to be the case that this pattern will start to change over time. And I think that there's a good reason to believe that it could be now, especially if Bitcoin does top out within 2024. Then what we see right now as a yellow year would really change to be a white year. And the way that I have personally been thinking about it is that the yellow and the white year just become merged. Now, there are clearly, these are both bullish years. These are the yellow year and the white year represent the bull market, the total bull market for Bitcoin. And I think it's by all means reasonable and logical for these 2 years in terms of their overall, just their general bullish sentiment to be absorbed into 1 year. Now, totally possible, like I said, the Bitcoin makes that final top in 2025. And if it does do so, like I said, I think it's likely to do that no later than around the 5th or 6th month of 2025. Somewhere around the 4th to 5th month is where I would be looking more towards if the 2025 is indeed the year that Bitcoin is going to see its next all-time high. But outside of that, there was one final thing that I did want to point out. I believe it was here on this chart. So if we, this one right here. So if I take away all these drawings and I look here at this 350-day moving average band, each of these little bands acting as Fibonacci extensions, we can see historically that the 1.618 Fibonacci down to the 2 Fibonacci, this range is bottommost range, the blue range, turquoise to dark blue. Bitcoin bottoms out here in 2011. It happened in 2015, 2018, then again it happened in 2022 recently. And then after we see the main moving averages, this DMA band, it's white and black, across the bull market's really confirmed. Bitcoin moves into this yellow to orange range, which is going to be the 1.618 to the 2. So I was mistaken earlier. So actually this turquoise is the negative 1.618 and the negative 2, and then the yellow to orange is then positive 1.618 to 2. So what we're seeing here is Bitcoin bouncing or bobbing from each of these two zones. You see bottom leading up to intermediate high. Then we see another bottom. Bitcoin pushes up to it, then breaks it, and then pushes to the 3, the positive 3 band. And then going back to these more early bull markets when Bitcoin was younger and had more strength, it did break it and push a little bit above it. But as Bitcoin is aging, you can see it's breaking it less and less. For example, right here, and then going to most recent phase or cyclical all-time high at 64K. It didn't even, other than wicking very minorly above this D times 3, and Bitcoin was basically closing right at it. And I wanted to point that out because this is something very similar to the channel I was showing on the weekly chart, where we saw the price move up to the 0.5 extension. We see the price move up to the 1.618 to the 2 range of the bands. See it doing the same thing here. Again, very similar to the pattern and the trend I was pointing out on that ascending Fibonacci channel. These final moments as Bitcoin is at its all-time highs, as it's clearly bottomed out, clearly, at least in my personal opinion, ranging sideways at the all-time highs before the final, which typically in history it's always lined up with the most parabolic move towards the upside to end the overall bull market. If we look here at the 3 band for the potential all-time high, right now it sits at approximately 150K. So that right there, especially, clearly if Bitcoin continues to go higher here, which seems to be the case, we'll see this band also continue to move higher as price goes higher. So right now it's already sitting at 150K. So at this point, I think 150K is like beyond reasonably viable for all-time high for Bitcoin. But assuming it keeps at least roughly the same slope that it's had since Bitcoin broke 30,000 for the last time, keeps this roughly that same slope. And a lot of the times when you go back and you do something what I'm doing right here, where you can start to see a roughly the same slope the entire time. Typically, the not the EMA, but the band is going to start to move even higher than the this kind of average median slope that I have drawn here, starting from around the end of September of last year. So I mean, this again also further starts to validate if Bitcoin's topping out sometime towards the end of this year, this EMA, or this band rather, will continue to move higher, perhaps even higher than this average slope, which would then encompass, as you can really see, further affirmation Bitcoin to continue to move towards the upside, towards the upper bound, upper region of the range that I've been talking about. But all of that being said and everything gone over, as always, none of this is meant to be financial advice, but I hope you all have a wonderful day.
I regret now, won't I see you forever, such a long